Hey guys, good morning. Today we're gonna make a pumpkin cake donut, okay? I'm gonna put the recipe on your Google Classroom. So if you wanna try it, you can. If you wanna look at it while I'm doing my recipe to follow along, feel free. It's a super easy recipe. It's definitely classified as a quick bread, right? We've talked about that before. Quick to make, quick to bake. So let's get going. So you can see I have all my ingredients out, my mise en place. I have my bowl, all my ingredients, my measuring cups. Okay. Um, Over here I have my cake pans. Okay. These are donut cake pans. If you don't have these, it's okay. You can use a regular muffin pan and they just won't be donut shaped, but they'll still taste delicious. All right. So here we go. So our first ingredient in order, okay, of the recipe, because we follow a recipe in order of ingredients and in order of steps. So I've already preheated my oven to 350 degrees. It's ready to go. I have my pan ready and my ingredients ready. So let's go. So a half cup of vegetable oil is the first thing we need to measure, right? Half cup of vegetable oil. And this is just regular vegetable oil. You know, you can use canola oil if you prefer, but it's just regular vegetable oil. So everything's going to pretty much go in one bowl. So I have a half cup of vegetable oil in my bowl. And this takes place of the butter, right? This is the fat that's in the recipe. Next, I have 3 large eggs. So 3 large eggs. Remember, right? I don't want to crack right to the side of the bowl. I want to crack into something else to make sure that A, the egg is good, and B, I don't get any shells in there. So I'm going to use my measuring cup since it's already dirty. All right, I've got 1 egg. And 2. And number 3. And I'm not cracking my egg right on the counter, right? We talked about putting a paper towel down, but I have a little plastic lid from a Chinese soup container, okay? So I crack my egg on there. This way I don't get egg on anything. And everything stays nice and clean and sanitary, right? I'm not cross-contaminating anything. So the next on my list of ingredients would be 1 to 1.5 cups of sugar. Now this recipe, you can make it less sweet. So you would just add the 1 cup of sugar, but I'm going to go ahead and add the 1.5 cups of sugar. Okay. So I have my sugar, and oh, I have a little shell in here. I need to get that guy out. 1.5 cups of sugar. And I'll put the alternate recipe in there if you guys want to do less sugar, you can. I'm going to go with the 1.5 cups of sugar. Okay. So this makes 15 donuts, I think. So it would take 2 rounds. Now remember, the sugar we can go in and scoop. Okay. So I've got 1.5. Make sure it's nice and level, right? 1.5. 1.5 cups of sugar. And then I have 1.5 cups of pumpkin puree. So pumpkin puree, right? It's everywhere in the store right now. It's the season. So, you know, you can get this in any supermarket, just regular pumpkin puree. I've already opened the top. So pumpkin puree is one of those non-leveling ingredients that we need to use dry measuring cups for, right? Things that are non-leveling, things that you need to level out. So I've got 1.5 cups of pumpkin puree. I'm going to use my spoon, and I'm going to fill my cup. Right, non-leveling. So I'm going to use my little offset spatula, and I'm going to make sure that my cup is nice and full and it's level. So I have 1. Let's leave that right there. And half. 1.5 cups of pumpkin puree. Now you want to get pumpkin puree. That's different than pumpkin pie filling. So pumpkin pie filling has other ingredients in it, not just pumpkin. So make sure when you're getting, if you go to make this recipe and you want to buy pumpkin puree, you buy pumpkin puree, not pumpkin pie filling. It's 2 different things. Pumpkin pie filling in the can is all ready to go. All you have to do is put it in your pie crust It already has the eggs and everything in there. So, right. So now I have my pumpkin puree. Next thing I have, let's see, beat together oil, eggs, sugar, pumpkin, spices, salt, baking powder until smooth. So let's see. I have 1.5 teaspoons of pumpkin pie spice. So pumpkin pie spice is, a blend of different ingredients. Okay, pumpkin pie spice. It has cinnamon, ginger, nutmeg, allspice, and some other things in there to keep it from caking together. So 1.5 teaspoons of pumpkin pie spice. And this is what's really going to give it that pumpkin flavor, right? That pumpkin pie flavor. Now, if you don't have pumpkin pie spice, you can use cinnamon and nutmeg and ginger separately. But I find it easier just to have a little pumpkin pie spice on the counter, especially this time of year, doing a lot of things with pumpkin. And it actually is really good to enhance a butternut squash soup too, right? It gives it some really super nice flavor. You get the warmth from the ginger and the cinnamon and the nutmeg. So 1.5 teaspoons of pumpkin pie spice, and then 1.5 teaspoons of salt. Okay, 1.5 teaspoons of salt. Again, make sure, right? I'm leveling off my salt, just using my finger. Right, level it off into the bowl. So I've got my salt. Now I need 1.5 teaspoons of baking powder, right? Baking powder, not baking soda, baking powder. They're not interchangeable. So this guy has a little lid so that you can kind of level off your spoon. So 1.5, let me just measure 1.5 teaspoons baking powder. All right, so I kind of scrape it along this little ledge, and I have a nice level teaspoon. 1.5 teaspoons baking powder. Boom. So now everything is in the bowl that I need except for the flour, right? But if we read the directions, it says, beat together oil, eggs, sugar, pumpkin, spices, salt, and baking powder until smooth. Now we don't want to add the flour until after we mix all these things together because we're making a cake. And we don't want to have a lot of gluten formation. And we talked about this before, when flour comes in contact with a liquid, right, it forms gluten. And when we're making cakes, we don't want a lot of gluten. We need a little bit of gluten because we need some structure, right? Gluten flour gives us structure. So I want to make sure that everything is mixed really, really well. Get my eggs all mixed in there, my spices, salt, baking powder, right? There's no lumps, bumps. Right? It's super nice and smooth. Let's see if you can see that without me spilling it over. So the last ingredient that I'm going to add is my flour. And my flour is 1 3/4 cups plus 2 tablespoons, okay? 1 3/4 cups plus 2 tablespoons. So I've got my flour. So 1 3/4 of a cup. Now there's no 3/4 measure. We've talked about this before. So I'm going to use my quarter measure 3 times, right? So 3/4. So remember, now flour, I want to spoon out, just give it a little tap, and then brush off the top. So I've got 1, 2, a little tap, 3. Okay, so that's my 3/4. Now I need 1 cup. All right, I've got my 1 cup measure. Again, I'm scooping out my flour into my cup measure. I don't want to dig that cup measure into the flour because I will mismeasure my flour. I'll get too much flour and we'll have a dry donut. Again, give it a little tap just to fill those air pockets. And then we're going to just level that off. Nice and level. Okay, nice and level. 1 cup. In addition to that, it says to add 2 extra tablespoons of flour. So 2 extra tablespoons of flour. 1. 2. 2 extra tablespoons of flour. I'm going to move this stuff out of the way so I have some space to work. Okay. Now, I'm going to just mix my flour until it all comes together. This is where I don't want to overmix things, especially when we're making cake-like items. So I'm just gently mixing my flour in, and it's starting to get a little tight, which is what we want because we want the consistency of a heavy cake batter, okay? Because it's a donut, a cake donut. Different kinds of donuts, right? You can fry certain donuts, but those are more, that's what we call a yeast dough, okay? We'll learn about yeast doughs a little further on down the line. So I've got everything mixed in. I've got a nice, super smooth batter. Clean off this here. Okay, so now you can use what they say a scant quarter cup. So if I took my quarter cup measure and I filled it just right under the ledge, that would be going in each donut hole. Okay, but I'm going to show you something a little different. It's a little easier and it makes it go a little faster. So I've got my donut pans. I'm just going to give them a little light spray. Now, you probably have canola oil home, vegetable spray, that's fine. I buy this Pam baking spray. It has a little bit of flour in it and the oil, so it really helps things not to stick, okay? So a little light spray in each hole. Make sure that I'm gonna just gonna use my hand to just make sure that it gets in all the nooks and crannies and the crevices of my donut pan. Again, you can use a muffin pan. I would use muffin papers. You could, if you have a non-stick muffin pan, you can certainly do it without the paper. Make sure you spray each well and kind of make sure you get in all those little crevices with your spray so that your muffins don't stick in there. Okay, so my pans are ready. Now I'm going to take a pastry bag. Okay, I have a disposable pastry bag. I know it's pretty big, right? So what you want to do with this is you always want to fold down the top so that it doesn't get dirty. Because if you get the batter on the outside, then it gets on your hands and then it gets everywhere. It makes a mess. So we're just going to fold down the top. I just have this little container that I make my shake in. And I'm going to just use this as a resting spot so that I don't have to hold my bag and pour my batter in the bowl, in the bag at the same time. So I've got my batter. It's going to go right in my bag. I'm going to pour this right in here. Okay. Now there's no pastry tip in this bag. It's just the bag. I haven't even cut the bottom out yet because I don't want my batter to fall through, right? You can use a portion scoop as well. You can just use a tablespoon or a teaspoon, you know, and it says to fill each cavity up 3/4 of the way. So 3/4 of the way. So now I have my pastry bag and now I'm going to flip that up. If you don't have a pastry bag, you could probably use a Ziploc, although I think it would be a little bit difficult in a Ziploc bag. So what I usually do is I just kind of grab a rubber band. And I just kind of rubber band the top. This way nothing comes out the top. Okay? So now I've got my batter in my bag. I've got my pans. Now I'm going to just very carefully, I'm going to cut a little bit of this tip of this bag off. So if you were using a Ziploc bag, you would just cut the tip off the Ziploc bag. And then I'm going to hold this end, and then I'm going to fill my pans up 3/4 of the way. So it's like 1.5 times around, okay? And then I squeeze the bottom so no more batter comes out, and I move on to the next one. 3/4 of the way. Again, squeeze and move on to the next one. Okay? I'm just going to tilt you down a little bit here so you can see what I'm doing. So squeeze, go around, fill up the pan 3/4 of the way. Then I squeeze the bottom so no more batter comes out, and then I go to the next one. Okay, and I'm going to do this pan. And along with this, we're going to make some cinnamon sugar. Again, I will pop that recipe on the Google Classroom for you guys. I think I just need a little bit more in this guy. A little bit more in this guy. Make sure that I've got a nice, good sized donut. Okay. So just, you have to remember to squeeze the bottom so that no batter comes out when you're moving your bag around. And it just makes it that much easier, that much neater. You're not getting cake dough everywhere. All right. This guy needs a little bit more. Okay. Now I can just kind of fold this guy up, and this will be for the next round because this makes 12 to 15 donuts depending on the size of your donut pan. So I'm just going to kind of shake this around a little bit and make sure that it's all filled in. There's no real big air pockets. I'm going to pop them in the oven, and they're going to take about 15 to 18 minutes, okay? 15 to 18 minutes. So when we come back, I'm going to take the donuts out of the pans. I'm going to toss them in some cinnamon sugar. I'm going to make a cup of coffee, and we'll have some donuts for breakfast, okay? See you guys in a bit. Bye.